Dr. Patrick Flynn, you are here to tell us how men and women are different and how to understand each other according to science. But you weren't always, well, maybe you were, but I got the impression from your book you weren't always a hormone expert.
No.
It was really when you found your now wife while you were still dating, lying on the floor in pain. What happened?
Well, I was a sick kid as a child, so that's what got my health adventure on. But mine was more of an immunological problem. And so what happened is, so I just started to go, I went to college. And then my aspect of my graduate college, I was just finishing up. I wasn't even a doc yet. And I ran into my soon-to-be wife, obviously. And when I met her, she was extremely sick. And I didn't know that. I didn't know at all. We were dating for about 2 days. And she looked at me and she goes, I think I'm going to marry you at our second date. And I said, hey, I think you're right. But then we started to get to know each other after about 2 weeks. What ended up happening was I came over to her place and I knocked on the door and answered and she was crying like crazy. And I was like, oh my goodness, what did I do already? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And I didn't do anything. What she did, she got her period that day. And what happened is every time she gets it, it was very devastating. It was very painful. And then she let me on a little thing that I had to make a choice. And that was a turning point in my life. And where all of a sudden she's like, listen, she goes, getting to know you over the last 2 weeks. She was serious when she said she wanted to marry me, but she said, listen, she goes, after getting to know you, I know you want kids. And she goes, I can't have kids. The doctors almost ripped her uterus out at a young age. She was at the time 22 years old. She suffered from endometriosis, ulcerative colitis, cystic acne, and cluster headaches. And believe it or not, I was going to be a doc within a couple months. And just looking at her, you couldn't tell.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? She was a beautiful 22-year-old, petite, everything like that. And what ended up happening was I actually had to make a choice. She gave me an opportunity to realize she was crying because she was so sick. But she actually said, listen, she goes, I'm giving you an opportunity to leave. And I was like, and I made the choice, said, listen, everything you just tell me and everything from my personal history and my background, I said, I disagree. And I realized all the experts that were taking care of her, they just had, I believe, the wrong perspective. And then I started digging deep in female hormones. And of course, now we have 4 beautiful daughters.
Yeah, exactly. So you ignored the doctors, you beat the odds. Your wife was able to have kids after being told she couldn't have kids. So what did you discover that helped change the trajectory of her health?
And the disagreement wasn't even, let's say, contradictory to what the doctors were doing. It's just that what happened is I believe that their perspective was much different than mine. And let me give you an example. So all of a sudden I said, hey, listen, so what's going on? And so found out that her mom had some issues and stuff like that. And so I started to dig deep a little bit. And I started to realize that I said, listen, in a short story, I said, can I look at all your labs and stuff that I had done? And then I realized from that standpoint on that the viewpoint of how our current healthcare system looks at things today is dramatically incomplete. I can sum this up a little bit differently is, if we look at hormones in general, obviously you're a woman, I'm a man. Okay. And what happened is if you think of me as a male, if we look at the one major hormone that controls me both physically and mentally, what do you think that hormone is?
Testosterone.
That's right. And so what happens is this, and it's very simply measurable. You can do it by blood, you can do it by urine, you can do it by many things. Well, what ended up happening was this. And if we look at a woman now, once again, we all have the same hormones. It's just obviously testosterone dominates my life. But what hormone do you think dominates your life?
Estrogen.
But what if I taught you that estrogen is not a hormone?
What? How?
Well, see, now think about this. Now imagine this. So my wife at 22, or any woman I've looked at, no joke, I've looked at hundreds of thousands, not 1,000, hundreds of thousands of labs. I've never had one woman come in and ever had her hormones tested properly. And here's why. Because all of a sudden, and they don't understand their hormones. So, and women go, oh, doc, wait, estrogen, it's not a hormone. It's a term that describes many hormones.
Oh, so there's multiple listed under that one word.
But guess what happens? Most women get 1, maybe 2 measured. And here's what happens. And they don't even get them tested properly. So testosterone controls me both physically and mentally, okay? Estrogens, you have to put an S on the end, control you both physically and mentally. But here's the big thing. I realized that most women have never had them tested because they maybe get 1 or 2. How can I make a decision as a doctor that hormones can affect you both physically and mentally? How can I do anything to you if I don't get a complete picture of what they are? So I started calling labs and said, can we measure all of them? They're like, yes, why? And insurance doesn't pay for them. I said, I have a woman who's deadly sick. She has endometriosis, which is more of an estrogen-dominant condition, but they measured her estradiol, which is just her one major cyclic hormone, missed all the rest. And it was normal. So the medical perspective was like, well, it must be genetic. No. No, because then when I measured all of them, and you can't just measure them by blood, you have to have blood and urine together. So I started testing women very differently back 24 years ago. And to realize that, my goodness, here's how the hormones are off. And so most women, so even if everybody watching this, if you haven't had all of your estrogens tested, guess what happens? You can't get a true physical or mental object in a woman. And then here's the biggest thing. Then I started to realize, I started mapping out all the estrogens and hormones of women. And testosterone stays very, very normal through a day for a man. It's a little higher in the morning. Ladies, how do we know that?
Right.
You know what I'm saying? See, we know that.
Right.
Okay.
Yes.
See, you laugh about that's true biology.
Yes.
Okay. So here's what happens. And so that's why, so mentally, men are actually more mentally stable because they have very little fluctuations. Now, women.
You haven't met my exes.
Yes. Well, there might be soy boys, but we'll talk about that. But the idea is this, but it has very little fluctuations that way. But here's what does happen. Okay. With women, I realized I started mapping out women's hormones and realized that women are cyclic monthly, but their estrogens and other hormones change 4 times a month. So I realized, wait, men and women change 4 times in the month. And let me give you a simple analogy on this. Women, there's sometimes you get up in the morning, you put your bra on, it's all nice and full. Next following week, you put your bra on, it's a bunch of shriveled raisins. It's like, where'd they go? You know, get my point?
I feel attacked.
See, no, but see what I'm saying? Yes. And the women go, oh my goodness, you're right. See, because your body changes every week differently. Now imagine this though, but here's one thing. And I was literally talking to a woman over in Europe today. Let's just say there's a very, I'll just say it. The owner of Spotify has this big event. They want me to come speak on this kind of female hormones. They want to say the interviews that way. And all of a sudden I said this, I said, listen, but now estrogens change 4 times a month. So guess what happens? Ladies, that means mentally you change 4 times in the month. And she goes, oh my goodness. She goes, I'm a CEO of this company, but there's some days of the month that I shouldn't make any decisions. That's right.
Yeah.
Because 4 times in the month, you are dramatically different. And that's okay. So men are going to deal with things and look at the world very differently than women because women's changes. So I say, men, imagine this. No joke. I have to go to Hawaii right after this. And when my wife and I, we've been married 22 years and been together 24. And it's kind of funny. And all of a sudden, when the pastor, we did a 20-year renewal. When the pastor looked at my wife and said, do you take this man? She says, yes. And the pastor looked at me and said, do you take this woman? I said, yes, 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 yes. Because you married 4 different women. And I know it's funny, but then what it did for women, is this, is it started to realize that as they go up and down, their emotions are not supposed to be stable. So I tell people, there's no such thing as an emotionally stable woman. It's physically impossible.
And that's okay.
And that's okay. But see, men don't understand that. So they look and go, honey, what's wrong? What's wrong? What's wrong? What's wrong? What's wrong? What's wrong? And it drives women nuts because they can't even explain what's wrong. And I'm telling you, I'm trying to teach men, there's nothing wrong with them.
Well, and that's the game changer of this conversation is you're saying it's not just women who need to understand our hormones. Yep. It is the men.
Yes.
So that men aren't like, I don't understand her. Why is she always changing her mind and doing all this? The guys have to know how hormones work too.
Hey everyone, for unedited, full-length, unapologetic content, go to my website, drpatrickflynn.com. Hit the subscribe button to join our community for more amazing content like this every day.